Welcome back to all the students of class 9. This is Karnesh Mishra from Lakshmi Prasad Memorial Public School, Gola Bazar, Gorakhpur. Dear students, today we are going to have a quick recap of the topmost story of the chapter, the French Revolutions, and the most important topic which is frequently asked in the examinations, did the women have revolutions and the evolutions of slavery. So let's start. Women revolutions. From the very beginning, women were active participate. Women were very active participants in the French revolutions. From the very beginning, women were very active participants in the French revolutions. They hoped that their involvement would pressurize the revolutionary government to introduce measures to improve the lives of the women. Most of the women of the third states had to work for a living as laundresses, sailors, domestic servants in the houses of the prosperous peoples, and domestic servants in the house of the prosperous people. Most of the women did not have access to educations or job training. The society of the revolutionary and republicans women was the most famous of them. To discuss to discuss and voice their interest, women started their own political club and newspapers. The Society of the Revolutionary and Republicans Women was the most famous of them. Women were disappointed that the constitutions of 1791 reduced them to passive citizens. In the constitutions of 1791, women were given the status of passive citizens. Who were the active citizens? The citizens who were above 25 years of age and were the higher taxpayer. They were given the status of the active citizens, and only the men who were above 25 years of age and paying taxes 3 days equal to a laborer's wage were in the category of active citizens, and the women, peasant, artisans, less taxpayers were in the category of passive citizens. Women were disappointed that the constitutions of 1791 reduced them to passive citizens. They demanded the right to vote, to be elected to the assembly, and to hold the political office. The revolutionary government did introduce law that helped improve the lives of women by creations of the states, by creations of the state schools. Schooling was made compulsory for all girls. Their fathers could no longer force them into marriage against their will. Marriage was made into a contract, entered into freely and registered under the civil law. Marriage was made into a contract, entered into freely and registered under civil law. Divorce was made legal and could be applied for by both women and men. Women could now train for a job, could have training for a jobs, could become artists or run small businesses. During the reign of terrors, the new government issued law ordering closure of women's club and banning their political activities. Many prominent women were arrested and a number of them executed. It was finally in the year 1946 that women in the France won the right to vote. Won the right to vote. Now, our point of discussion is abolitions of slavery. Abolitions of slavery, the unwillingness of Europeans to go and work in a colonies in the Caribbean, which were important suppliers of commodities such as tobacco, indigo, sugar, and coffee, created a shortage of laborers on the plantations. Thus, the slave trade began in the 17th century. French merchants sailed from their ports to the African coast, where they bought slaves from local chieftains. They bought slaves from the local chieftains. Slaves were branded and shackles. The slaves were packed tightly into the ships for the 3 months long voyage across the Atlantic to the Caribbean. There they were sold to the plantation's owner. The exploitations of slave laborers made it possible to meet the growing demand in European markets for sugar, coffee, and indigo. Port cities like Bordeaux and Nantes owed their economic prosperity to the flourishing slave trade. The National Assembly held long debates for about whether the right of men should be extended to all French subjects, including those in the colonies. But it did not pass any law, fearing oppositions from businessmen whose income depended on the slave trade. Jacobin regime in 1794 abolished slavery in the French colonies. However, 10 years later, Napoleon reintroduced slavery. Slavery was finally abolished in French colonies in the year 1848. So, in the year 1848, the slavery was finally abolished. Now, we are going to discuss the revolutions and everyday life. How was the life of the peoples during the French revolutions? After the storming of the Bastilles in the summer of 1789 was the abolitions of censorship. That means the declarations of the right of men and citizens proclaimed freedom of speech and expressions to be a natural right. Newspaper, pamphlets, books, and printed pictures flooded the towns of France, from where they traveled rapidly into the countryside and described and discussed the events and changes taking place in the France. Plays, songs, and festive processions attracted large numbers of the peoples, which was one of the way they could grasp and identify with ideas such as liberty or justice. Rise of Napoleon Bonaparte. After the end of the reign of terror, Directory created a political instability. In the year 1804, Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself Emperor of France. He conquered many neighboring countries and placed members of his family on the crown. Napoleon saw his role as a modernizer of Europe. He introduced many laws such as the protections of private property and uniform system of weight and measures provided by the decimal system. Initially, many welcomed Napoleon as a liberator who would bring freedom for the peoples. But what happened? But soon the Napoleonic armies came to be viewed everywhere as an invading force. He was finally defeated at Waterloo in the year 1815. In the year 1815, he was finally defeated. Now we are going to have a quick recap of the chapters. Okay. Before this, we have studied France abolishes monarchy and becomes republic and the reign of terror. So we are going to revise or have a recap of the topic, the reign of terror. The period from 1793 to 1794 is referred to as the reign of terrors, as the Maximilian Robespierre followed a policy of severe control and punishments. All his enemies, such as noble clergy, members of the other political parties, even members of his own party who did not agree with his methods, were arrested, imprisoned and guillotined. Maximilian Robespierre government issued laws placing a maximum ceiling on wages and prices.
All the teachers, all the subject teachers are reminded to join this classroom 12B2.
Peasants were forced to transport their grains to the cities and sell it at the prices fixed by the government. The use of more expensive white flour was forbidden and all citizens were required to eat the bread of equality, a law made of whole wheat. Instead of traditional monsieur, and madams, all French men and women were addressed as citoyen and citoyenne. Churches were shut down and their buildings converted into barracks or offices. This is also very and most important topics which is usually asked in the examinations. And the most important topic, France abolishes monarchy and becomes republics. As I have explained to all of you that the Louis XVI had signed the constitutions, but he entered into the secret negotiations with the King of Prussia. Before rulers of the other neighboring countries too were worried by the developments taking place in the France and made plans to send troops to stop the revolutionary event taking place. Before this could happen, the National Assembly voted in April 1792 to declare war against Prussia and Austria. Thousands of the volunteers joined the army from the provinces to join the army. People saw this war as a war of the people against the king and aristocracy all over Europe. The patriotic song Marechals, composed by the poet Robert de la Esque, was sung for the first time by volunteers from Marseilles as they marched into Paris, which is now the national anthem of the France. The Revolutionary Wars brought losses and economic difficulties to the peoples. The constitutions of 1791 gave political right only to the richer sections of the society. Political clubs were established by the peoples who wished to discuss government policies and plan their own forms of action. The most successful of these clubs was that of Jacobins. The member of Jacobin clubs belongs mainly to the less prosperous sections of the society, such as small shopkeepers, artisans, as well as servants and daily wages worker. Their leader was Maximilian Robespierre. Jacobins start wearing a long, steep trouser and came to be known as sans culottes, literally meaning those without knee breeches. In the summers of 1792, the Jacobins planned a revolt of a large number of the peoples of Paris who were angered by short supplies and high prices of the food. On August 10, they stormed the palace of Tuileries, massacred the king's guard, and hold the king himself as a hostage for several hours. Later, the assembly voted imprisons the royal family. Elections were held. From now, all men of 21 years and above, regardless of wealth, got the right to vote. The newly elected assembly was called the conventions. On 21st September 1792, it abolished the monarchy and declared France a republic. Louis XVI was sentenced to death by a court on the charge of treason. The Queen Mary Antoinette met the same fate shortly after. That's all. Thank you for listening to all of you. Take care, prepare yourself from the examination point of view so that you can attempt more and more questions, or you can attempt any questions asked from any corner of the chapters. These are the most important points and topics of the chapters, so keep it in your mind. Continue your study. Take care of your health also. Thank you for listening me. Once again, have a great day to all of you.